Moving along, I am pleased to introduce our next moderator and longtime WDO collaborator, Surya Vanka. Surya was with us last year for Let's Talk Diversity, and we are so happy to have him here again with us this year for this last stretch of our program. Surya is a transdisciplinary designer who has worked at the leading edge of physical and digital experiences for over 25 years. He is the founder of Authentic Design, president emeritus of the Seattle Design Festival, and was chair of Interaction Week. Surya was the director of user experience at Microsoft, a tenured professor of design at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and a fellow of the prestigious Center for Advanced Study. Surya is the creator of Design Swarms Method, a lightweight design technique used in business, nonprofit, and education worldwide. In addition to moderating this next conversation, which we are very excited about, he will then join us to present his own perspective on leadership and design before jumping in with both Natalie and myself for the last 30 minutes of our program to discuss some highlights and lessons learned over the last 24 hours. Surya, I will leave it to you to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much, WDO. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our next wonderful speaker. Tolu is actually the creator of Black Sue Design, which is this website and his passion project that he has been working on for a while and really built, and is super impactful. He's in fact going to be joining and shifting from that and joining Dropbox as a designer very soon. And so I'm super excited for this conversation that we are going to have together.
Yes.
Hi, Tolu.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm particularly honored to be, having this conversation with you. Being a bit of an early career designer myself, I'm a little bit familiar with some of the methods that you have pioneered. They've been a part of the work that I've done. So this is an absolutely wonderful opportunity for me. It's a true treat, and I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm interested in hearing more about how you came into the world of design. How did you make this choice in your own career, and how have you carved out this very special project and this very niche and this very impactful space? So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, what you led you to design, and so on?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'd be more than happy to tell you about that. So I was actually born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. I lived there till I was about 15. And then my parents subsequently moved our family here to Toronto, Canada. In terms of how I got into design, I came in from a non-traditional background. I actually have a degree in software engineering from the University of Ottawa. And so halfway through my degree, I had the really awesome opportunity of interning as an engineer embedded on a design team at a company called Portfolio. And really what I was doing there was prototyping. At the time, I didn't know. I was really just knocking off really interesting things for the design team. But I really got to see the kinds of questions that they got to ask. And that was perhaps my first attempt at really thinking deeply about the path that I was on, and perhaps thinking about a different path. And so seeing these designers around me ask questions about the product, who we're building for, why we're building for these particular sets of people, what are the constraints, what do we need this to really do before we get into questions around the tech stack, was particularly very interesting to me. And so it was around that time, about three and a half years ago now, this same summertime, that I made that decision that I wanted to explore, what those questions would look like. I'm particularly fortunate of going to a school that had very regular periods where you would go out to work and then you would come back to school and then go out to work again. So I used my next period to explore being a designer. And I haven't looked back since. I think after that, after my first foray, I then went on to intern at some really great places, piloted the project Black City Design. I should make a small correction. I co-created that alongside Wes O'Hare from Dropbox, a few other folks as well. So it really was a team effort. And then since then, really just been on this journey.
Now, I want to go back a little bit to how you moved from tech. So you're working in this tech stack and you were learning how to code, you were learning about architecture, you're learning about all those things that are about technology, right?
Yeah.
And then what did you notice that was different about design, and what attracted you from this one rigorous way of thinking to a different rigorous way of thinking? What was the draw?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a really great question. I'd love to tell you. So for me, looking back on my path and looking back on who I am, I actually started coding right around when I was 10. I'm very fortunate to have a dad who was, really, saw that foresight and said, hey, try this out. And I personally took to it. But I really only ever saw it as a tool in the toolbox. So I'm not necessarily one of those people that didn't particularly obsess about the ins and outs of a new tech stack or the ins and outs of a particular way of coding. I'm really more interested in what can we do with it? And subsequently, what does that make happen for people? Does coding this particular way make it so that we can create this particular experience so that people can do this thing that they couldn't do before? Those are the kinds of questions I really enjoyed asking, generally speaking. And prior to that, I really thought the only way to go about expressing that was as an engineer. So it was really my first time ever bumping into this world of, design, and more specifically UI UX design, and now we call product design. So really, when I saw that and saw those questions, I saw I think an even greater affinity for the types of questions that I wanted to ask, and really the types of outcomes that I wanted, which was a little bit more of a closer feel with the experiences that people would have, and less so around, are we using a hammer or a screwdriver or some other kind of tool set, in the context of engineering to make that happen.
Right, that's right. When you're speaking about it, it occurs to me, if you think about design, being this field with these two centers of gravity, right? One of them is it shares with the world of tech, which is about innovation and building, right? How to create something really new and innovative and just prototype and build them. And the other center of gravity being people-centric and understanding and empathy. And as you were talking about it, it sounded like you were saying, yeah, tech was kind of satisfying the one center of gravity, but I found myself very much drawn to the other, which is on people's centricity. So that's
110%. Yeah.
That's very cool. So as you went through this journey and moved into design, what sparked this idea for you and your co-creators to want to create this resource called Blacks Who Design?
Yeah, no, that is a really
moment. Was there a moment that sparked
something? Yeah, no, I can, the moment is clear in my mind's eye, clear as day. I'd like you to imagine this young designer, even younger than I am now, me. I'm exploring design, I'm kind of getting in there, I'm absorbing as much information as I can from all over the internet. And then I'm beginning to notice there aren't a lot of folks who look like me. I'm not really seeing that. And I mean, if they are, the next question is, where are they, right? And of course, there's really one of two possibilities. Yeah. Either A, I'm the first bloke on the planet to discover design, or B, they're out there, I just can't find them. And so it's probably more probable that they are out there, doing design in really all sorts of shapes and forms at various different levels. They're just not particularly highlighted in the particular traditional way. So when I watch the design talks, when I watch the product talks, when I dig in deep, I really don't see a lot of those faces. And so it was particularly disheartening Because I mean, I start to begin to think like, is this going to be an uphill journey? Am I going to make any sort of success in this space if the folks that have been doing this even longer than I have aren't particular you know excuse me aren't particularly visible? So those are the sorts of questions that I remember distinctly asking myself. And then at the time, that was when I bumped into Wes O'Hare, really on Twitter. So, and then that was when we decided, hey, you know what? You've got the energy, and and so and really, he's got those connections to all these different kinds of people. And I knew how to build stuff. I knew how to build websites. It's what I've been doing for a long period of time. And so we kind of came together with a few other people and said, you know what? There shouldn't be people like me, young designers, who feel this way. Wes is, a full decade ahead of me in my design. In terms of his design career. But for me, just starting out, it was really imperative that those who came after me not have to bump into the same challenge. And so that was really the unique, I think that catalyst for the creation of Black Suit Design. And then we really just went on this journey, essentially collecting this repository, this really ever-growing list that has now become a Slack community of Black designers globally. So we have almost 3,000 plus designers across the world.
I first want to say this is such a amazing story of turning friction into leadership. You felt this particular friction in your life of saying, I need to figure out, I don't have access to the information. And I love how you said, okay, I'm going after it and I'm going to build it if it's not there. And but how did you start to gather the information? Was it word of mouth? How did you actually get? I've been on your website, and there, okay, a rich website which is categorized by, different capabilities, different roles, and so on. So you can really get really sort of quick way to discover a whole bunch of folks. So can you talk a little bit about how you actually built that out?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's really no way to say it. The first few were just a labor of love, like just finding people, reaching out and saying, hey, do you want to be on this website or not? Obviously, it's really important that we have the consent of people before we gather them in that way. So that was the first step, just doing that over and over again. So really, there wasn't any efficient way to do that. It was really just a smack, labor of love there. And so that was how we got our first few sets of people. Wes, he's been in the industry longer than I have, and so really I'm just relying on his network. He would reach out to people. I would, follow that up, and then once we have consent, then try to, figure out, where to bucket them into. So it's really just repeating that process over and over and over again. And then when we launched, we then eventually added a nomination process as well. So people can nominate people on their team. You can nominate people that you know. And then that was how we began to grow past the initial set of people that we knew within our network. And that's when we started to find, all sorts of designers globally, because they would just get nominated by a fellow designer, nominated by an engineer who's worked with them, nominated by a PM, nominated by, somebody else. And then, of course, we started to have, UI UX designers, fashion designers, content designers, all sorts of different kinds of people start to nominate each other. And so at first it was really just this, labor of love, very hands-on process that then grew into what is now a nomination process. And that's generally how. And then for the Slack community, it's pretty much self-directed. We just exist to generally guide it in a few directions and set a few ground rules, but we generally let people connect however they please.
Fantastic. How many folks do you have on the site now?
On the site, I haven't looked at the numbers.
Right, in the spot.
But the last time I checked, it was definitely about 300, 400 plus people.
That's amazing.
On the site. The Slack is much larger these days.
That is amazing. I am part of a coalition that's called Diversity by Design and DXD.design. And uh, this has been for about 2 years now. There's been a cross-industry group, and so very much sort of aligned to what you're trying to do. And our work began by, seeking out and listening to Black and brown designers and leaders and corporations in different educational institutions, associations, nonprofits, and so on.
Yeah.
And the whole goal has been to listen, to understand about inequities, and to make sure that there is a equitable place for folks to learn about design, to have a way into the design profession, to have thriving careers, and so on. And we've been doing this for about 2 years, and we made a good amount of progress. But boy, it's clear that it's a long road.
Yeah.
And while we're making that progress, it's clear that some of the institutional hurdles and so on that need to be overcome. So I want to lead into asking, what are you seeing so far in this? I would still say it's an early effort, right? You've got 300 people, but it hasn't been out for several years so far. But what are you seeing has been the impact so far?
Yeah, no, the impact has been absolutely it's been amazing. I think the first thing for me, when I started this and when we came together, Wes and I and the rest of our core creators, we really said, look, if one person feels like they can do design, be a designer, pursue a career in design because of this, then it's worth doing. And so that was really that was really and honestly the first step that we took there. But in terms of the real or in terms of the success beyond that, it has been, a source of hiring. Like, we've had recruiters who and people in the community who have pointed to Black Student Design as a reason for their current position, their last position. So it's a way for people to hire and to expand their recruiting pipelines. We've had, conferences that would have otherwise struggled, or finding speakers of various backgrounds, use the site as a directory to connect to people. I've had people personally email me say they get freelance gigs from this as well. So that alone for me is, those are the three different ways that we've seen real tangible impact. Expansion of the pipeline for recruiting for many companies, large and small. We see startups from YC Techstars come, say, hey, I'm looking for a head of design. I need to be plugged into the community, and and we plug them in there. We see folks, I think even for me, I'm an example of how, this is how I was able to connect to the WDO community. So there are, people who are, discovering new ways to share their stories with various conferences through, through the site and through the community. And then, of course, last but not least, is really that that expansion of, freelance opportunities, all sorts of different things. But I think for me personally, it really does come back to, my heart always warms when I see that one email that says, I discovered Black design. I didn't know there were these, these many people that did product design that were Black. Right? I didn't know that that there were that I could go as far as being head of design at some place and be Black doing it. And it's like, yeah, you can. And here's 5 people that have done it. Here's 6 people that have done it. And it may not be 100, but it's not 0. And so that means that you can be, the next one. That for me is really, really, those are the things that make a project like this worth doing.
Fantastic. We are today we're talking about leadership, and you're really demonstrating leadership really through this work that you're doing, of not waiting for this site or these resources to be created for you, just stepping up and doing it. So I want to ask you about this thing that all of us for the past 23 and a half hours or so have been talking about leadership. And you are early in your career and doing these leader-like things. So what's that? What do you think is that relationship? Because typically we think of leaders as those people who look more like me with gray beards, and these are the leader people, right? They've sort of been in their careers for like 20 years, 30 years. But as it's very clear, we just had a panel of three young leaders who are shaping the future who are not 20 yet, right? The three young ladies. And so I want to hear your take on the relationship between seniority and leadership, or even lack of seniority and leadership. So just what relationship between the two as you take on these leadership roles?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. And my thoughts on these are very simple. I don't think you're ever too young to carve out a problem and attack it. And if you start with that alone, you are being a leader. I mean, what is a leader if not somebody who sees a challenge, sees a problem, and decides that I'm going to be the catalyst to change. I'm going to be the catalyst of some net positive movement. In this problem space, right? I think the first thing that I would advise, that I would tell any young person, early career designer, whatever you want to frame it as, is that that's the definition of leadership. If you can carve out a problem space, it's a real problem that people face, and you can cause some net positive movement in that, you are being a leader. Now, of course, I'm also uniquely aware that there are certain things that are easier to solve and become much more solvable with time, with experience. And that's why, I also think that, there's also a form of leadership when you reach out as a young person or as an early career designer to make those connections, perhaps with someone like you, or the way I did to reach out to Wes, who is a good decade ahead of me in the space, to say, hey, look, you've got something, and I've got something, and I think together we can make even bigger impact as well. That itself is a form of leadership as well. Finding these, like to kind of borrow a bit of your words, gray bearded or gray haired people, and saying, hey, you are not you are not done. There is work to be done, and you may have the knowledge, the expertise. I've got the energy. Let's come together. Let's stand, side by side, or stand on your shoulders and make even greater impact happen. I think it is a complete disservice and a missed opportunity as well if people early in my career like me, and people who are a little further along like you, don't connect. If those connections aren't being made to say, hey, look, I've got something, you've got something, we can come together to make this happen. That's really how I view the matter. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love a few words that you phrased there, and I think this really connects to where leadership is today. So you used three words. One was the notion. So one was about carving out a space. The second one was the notion of catalyzing. And the third is the notion of a movement. These are not words that are typically always been part of when we talk about leadership. It's not about catalyzing. It is typically about going up. It is, the older model of leadership had been pretty much about rising up the ranks, going to the top of the pyramid, and therefore having the authority to be able to lead. But today, leadership is different, where it is about something that is not only vertical, top down, but sideways. And given that we've got the platforms and we've got cultures developing a certain way, so I think that's really important what you said about catalyzing and creating movements. Now it's interesting, when you talk about sort of folks who are working across different stages of their career, I always keep a spreadsheet myself, which I call my 100 teachers. And this is a list of people I want to learn from. And I've kept this for years. And it's always, for a long time, it always had people who were sort of seasoned practitioners that I wanted to meet, have a conversation with, learn something from. Now, most of that spreadsheet is folks who are way younger than me, who've got the energy in one place or the other. So I love what you just said about.
And I'm sure they would love to have a conversation with you.
So, I think, we've got about 5 minutes more, and I have a couple of questions. The first is, how do people find Blacks Who Design? What's the best way? Is it the website?
Yeah, so you can find us. Yeah, website is blackswho.design or Blacks Who Design on Twitter as well. Those are probably the one or two, I think those are the two big ways. If you're having any challenges joining the Slack, you can add Blacks Who Design on Twitter, and we'll, get you added to that ever-growing Slack community. But those are the two big ways.
Got it. And how can folks on this session, how can folks help your mission? What's one thing they can do to help your mission?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the first big one is we're always taking nominations. Reach out into your network, nominate somebody. Their visibility, tells a story for someone else. That's really all that we ask. We don't, right now we're pretty much self-funded. We push the work ourselves. How people can also help the work is expand your network. This was really a mission, an experiment, all sorts of different things to challenge people to push, what they traditionally define as their network beyond just what they normally would call it. So I encourage people, go out there, find somebody who is in your space and make that connection. These are people who have consented to being on that place. They would love to connect with you. They would love to have, whether it's a 30-minute or 20-minute conversation. Those are really, the two big things. Beyond that, I think if folks listening to my voice can do those two things, we can make some real tangible change in the world. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Super. Well, thank you for your good work. And I've got one last question for you. So you're transitioning from running your own business to now becoming a part of Dropbox. What's one leadership trait, one leadership lesson, something with leadership that you have taken from building Blacks Who Design, and now that you use as you move into this role as a designer at Dropbox?
Yeah, no, I think the biggest one is don't be afraid to make connections. I think I started out at a point in my career where I really was very hungry for those connections. And so I was able to just kind of reach out and say, hey, look, there's something cool that I think we can do together. And this is why I think you should do it with me. And really just making that, that pitch. I think it's an edge that I don't want to lose. It's an edge that I don't want to let go of. And so as I go into Dropbox, I'm going to be keeping my eye out for what are a few different ways, a few different people that I can connect with, such that when I do work and they do work and we come together, we make some new things happen, either for people at Dropbox, either for users of Dropbox, or for Dropbox as a company as a whole. So I think that's the big thing that I'm going to be taking in.
Tolu, thank you so much. That was just a awesome conversation, and thank you again for doing great work on behalf of all of us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Like I said, it's an absolute honor to have this conversation with you, and thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you, Tolu. Just quickly before you pop out, I just wanted to say a big thank you to you for joining our program today and for taking the time to share your story. I hope this is not the last we're seeing of you. This was such an engaging and wonderful conversation. We hope to have you back as part of a next program at some point in the future.
For sure, for sure.
Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Bye now.